me. Now, let's talk about a woman by the name of Lucy Connolly. I don't know if you saw the Telegraph over the weekend. My good friend Alison Pearson wrote an incredibly hard-hitting piece about Lucy Connolly. She is the Southport mum. She's got 2 children, and she is currently behind bars, serving a 2.5-year sentence for her involvement in the post-Southport attack riots. Her involvement was down to precisely, well, one post on Facebook that was up for only 4 hours before she realised the error of her ways after writing the post and took it down. And yet she's still serving time behind bars. Well, the likes of Suella Braverman, Liz Truss and others have now spoken out and saying that when she goes trying to get a date in the Court of Appeal, it's coming up in mid-May, she should be allowed out on basically on a curfew and a tag as home release because she has young children and she's a carer for her husband. You'll remember her though as the wife of a Tory councillor jailed, as I say, last October. She pleaded guilty to inciting racial hatred for her post on X made not Facebook, made just hours after the Southport killings. But should she still be in jail when there are people who've actually committed violence against people, not just written some words they left on social media for a few hours, who are already out of jail? Let's talk to Daw KC, who's a barrister, writer and broadcaster. Very, very good morning to you, Chris.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. Now, it's important to actually read out the post that she wrote. It's a horrible, vile, racist tweet, in my view. I don't like it at all. She wrote very, very, very straightforwardly. Now I've got the copy which doesn't have the full tweet here, rather annoyingly. She said, "You can set fire to the asylum hotels with people in there for all I care. I feel physically sick knowing that these families, Southport families, will now what they'll have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it." Now, her message was viewed some 310,000 times. She was interviewed by police immediately afterwards. She was charged 3 days later and has been in jail ever since. Why do you think her case needs to be looked at again?
Well, I think we need to decide as a society where we want to go with the policing of comments made on the internet, whether it's on Facebook or X or any other platform. The truth is that we are in a society now where people have access through their phones and through their computers at any time of day or night to social media platforms where they can say whatever's in their head, whether it is offensive to other people, whether it's racist, whether it's deeply misogynist. People have the technology to do that. And as a society, we have to decide, do we want the police to be involved in policing social media in the way that happened in this case? Do we want the courts to be involved in policing social media? And do we want to spend tens and tens of thousands of pounds to imprison people for sending a very, very badly judged and yes, racist message, but at the same time as thousands and thousands of women and victims of sexual violence can't get their cases into court at all because there is a massive backlog in our criminal justice system, which means that rapists are walking the streets today because there's not enough court time for them to be tried in court, convicted and sent to prison. But somehow we found time as a society for this case to be pushed in front of that queue. I find it absolutely appalling, and I just have no idea where as a society we're going to end up if we're going to send police officers round to mothers who have sent tweets, which they've then immediately regretted and taken down and deleted the whole account within hours, and we're sending them to prison as a mother.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. She's also a carer for her husband, a mother to young children. Again, no criminal record, no history of anything. It was very interesting that the judge in her case, and again, this was at a time when, again, we're always told, oh, we cannot get involved by politics, we cannot get involved in decisions by judiciary, except, of course, judiciary was basically directed. We want you to come down hard, we want instant, courts running 24 hours, put these people in jail. No one was getting bail. A woman with no history of violence or criminality whatsoever, a mother and a carer, basically not even been given bail. She was worried she was never going to get out. She agreed to plead guilty, even though she didn't plan to incite racial hatred. She was angry and upset at the time. But then she got jailed for 2.5 years, 31 months. And the judge, in his sentencing remarks, talked about how diversity is our strength. He was making political, no, it's not. I would say he was making political points. Fully signed up, woke judge.
No,
but what's fascinating?
Julia, I disagree with you. The way that I've read I've read the judgment myself this morning ahead of this interview. It's only a short judgment. It's available online if anyone wants to read exactly what the judge said. The judge actually commented, and this has been missed in the mix here, that this lady had lost a child.
Well, I was just going to come to that.
I'm grateful. But we are dealing here with someone who has a history of significant trauma in her life, which clearly deeply, deeply damaged her and would damage any of us.
Again, I was going to come to that. She has been diagnosed, she was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from the loss of her child as a result of medical failure, negligence at the hospital where her child was. Absolutely devastating. I don't know how anyone could ever cope with that. And she'd been struggling with that all this time and was always very, very triggered by anything where children died, which is why she was so triggered by what she saw and what we read about and knew about in the news on that, especially on that first day about Southport. I mean, God, when we were reading out what had actually happened in that case on the day when we actually had the sentencing, I mean, I barely made it through without crying. It was so traumatic to even just read it out. And I've not gone through anything like the loss she's gone through. But this is the thing. We've got to talk about now about these sentencing, guidelines that the Sentencing Council wants in terms of, allowing for people's past, their ethnicity, and all these other reasons that are mitigating factors. But for some reason, the court just skirted over the fact that this woman was clearly a woman. There were clearly mitigating factors in her case, but they were completely ignored.
Well, it's the problem, Julia. This is why I'm always reluctant when people are going to criticise the judge, because when you read the judgment, what you'll see and you'll gather from it, as we as criminal lawyers know only too well, that the reason why these sentences were imposed is because of sentencing guidelines, which judges are more or less forced to follow, whether they feel that it's morally just or morally right or not. When I started out as a barrister in the 1990s, I could still stand up in front of a judge and plead for mercy and plead for empathy and plead for a degree of understanding about the individual circumstances of the individual defendant. But nowadays, all of that is, well, that's all very well, Mr. Daw, but the sentencing guidelines are very clear and I've got to follow. If we have ridiculous, perverse sentencing guidelines, which we absolutely do in this country across so many ranges of criminal justice, then we end up with perverse outcomes like this, where, as I say, probably 50 or 60 or 70,000 pounds of public money has been spent just on keeping her in prison, where she absolutely should not be and doesn't need to be.
She's no risk. She's no risk to anyone. One of the key issues here is the legal advice she got from a duty solicitor was that that she should plead guilty, and there was the expectation if she pleaded guilty, she would be given a lesser term, and then she could go back home with her children sooner. And no one was getting bail. The concern was that she was with women, being held with women who would waited months and months and months for a court date, who were not allowed bail. And so that she figured, well, I'll be out quicker. So she was given some very poor advice. Now, she's got an appeal case coming up in middle of May. She's now being backed by the Free Speech Union, covering the costs of that case, and arguing that basically, she was charged with the wrong crime. It wasn't incitement on that level. It wasn't such a serious crime that she should be eligible for those sentencing guidelines. But the fundamental thing does come back to, look, I don't want people thinking what she thought. I mean, the full tweet: mass deportation now. Set fire to all the effing hotels full of the B word, for all I care. If that makes me racist, so be it. Now, at that time, it was believed that it was an asylum seeker who'd arrived on boats. That was what went round on social media. It was incorrect. It was the son of people who had come to this country, but that was incorrect at the time. But to even then say, well, everybody else, I don't care if everyone else dies who come in the same circumstances, that's a horrible thing to think. It's a horrible thing to write. But the tensions were heightened. Is it something that should mean that the police turn up at your door? Is it something that means you should serve time in jail? Certainly, serving time in jail, I think, is absurd, given that people can shoplift 50 times and not spend time in jail, given that Hugh Edwards, with the doyen of British broadcasting, can be sent pictures of babies being raped, and he doesn't spend a single moment behind bars. The idea that she should be sent away for a tweet that she wrote and then deleted is patently absurd.
Well, I absolutely agree. And I just think we don't have the resources in our society to deal with the real crimes, the burglaries that people report and the police never turn up when their house and their home utterly destroyed by burglary. When, as I say, there are tens and tens of thousands of reports of rape just sitting in the system, not being looked at for year after year after year, and all 90% of them never reaching court or more than that. But we're wasting money on nonsense like this. What we've got to do is we've got to say to ourselves, as a society, do we accept that people have the right to say things that are offensive, okay, that deeply offend other people? Because if we're going to stop people doing that by the criminal law, then I'm afraid that many of the sentiments that this lady put out, with which I completely and wholeheartedly disagree, as clearly do you, but many people thought that at the time. Many people have...
And we should be entitled to judge her in those circumstances for thinking it, but that doesn't mean she should go to prison. I mean, that's the key thing. So we're going to have to leave it there because time is against Daw KC, a barrister, writer and broadcaster. Thank you so much.